Good morning, everybody. The people are downstairs finishing up their morning snack. And we will start in just a few minutes, so please stay with us. Thank you.
I said to Denise, who's doing it? He said, Mark. She said, Mark. I looked around, but he's not here. I'll go.
Well, I came up, it's on now, it's live. You're on live.
Hi, everybody.
I came up and started it because if people think it's gonna start at 10 o'clock
Yeah.
and they tune in and
Yes.
it's not on,
Yeah.
they leave. As of 10 o'clock, we still didn't have anybody.
Okay.
But at least we'll have the entire program on our YouTube
Okay.
channel for people to
Forever.
come back and watch.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to start boosting them up here. So.
Yeah, we gotta get going.
Yeah, I know that Denise said it's time to start moving upstairs, but I think I'm the
Yeah.
only one who really listened.
Yeah, there's nobody on it.
Okay.
There's nobody in the pajama pews, but at least we'll have it so people can come back and see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
I can say that again.
Do you want to put the lapel mic on Rabbi Barrof or not?
I'll ask him.
Yeah. You gonna get tomorrow off?
Maybe. I don't know. It's been a while since I've had
Yeah,
a Monday off.
I know. I've got to leave here. We've got a birthday party for our one-year-old great-grandson
Oh, wow.
at 12:30
Where?
at the firefighters club out on the lake.
That's fun.
So I've got to hustle.
First year we did smash cakes.
Oh,
That was a thing, I think, a Florida thing, I don't know.
yeah,
You buy a cake just for them to smash.
yeah. We did that with the kids. We get a small cake, they'd be in a high chair,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
just put it in front of them and let them mush.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, how are you?
Today.
Rabbi had a request to wear the lavalier.
Okay. You're familiar with it?
Remember, they installed it when I was here. They wore it.
This is a newer one, but I think it's basically.
Now, if would it be feedback if I use this basically? Okay.
Harvey, you are so full of compliments. I should call you every day.
They asked me to do a quick.
It's okay, so it's perfectly all right. That's what I remember, but I don't know if anything changed. Okay, thanks for that. testing.
Nope, that sounds good.
Yeah, I don't think it was as good as it was.
It's good.
All right. Everyone can hear, that's good? Thumbs up?
Are people still coming up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're still coming up.
Okay.
Scholar, Rabbi, Barrof. Scholar and resident.
It's just a summary of how.
We're still waiting?
Mark, this is for you.
Thank you.
And Rabbi, yeah, people are still down there. I think I'll go in and start pushing a little bit.
Okay, I'll wait for your...
Yes. I think I'll go. Everybody's busy reading this, so I'll go downstairs. I'll push all the people who are still yeah.
Did you give him his logger out of here? Yeah. He's got it. Friday night.
He's got it.
He's got it on. He's got it.
Thank you. Now, when you can't, I used to tell Rabbi Dad you gave a great sermon. The only problem is I only heard half of it
Yeah.
because Mary would say to me, "What did he say?" And then I'd repeat it to her, and I missed the other half.
Who's got it on? Are you ready? Okay. Welcome and welcome back. We're glad you're here. I want to first say it was a delight hosting you, Rabbi Barrof. We've been really fortunate to have you to make this Hanukkah extra special. And back at your pulpit here. And Rabbi has been teaching us about Hanukkah this weekend, and he's going to continue with another lesson on Hanukkah this morning. So thank you so much for all you taught and you're going to teach. Thanks for making the trip back. And thank you all for showing up, and for so many of you for the hard work you put into making this a really special weekend. Help me welcome back Rabbi Barrof.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good morning, everyone. As you remember, my style is very informal, so this is not so much a lecture as a kind of guided discussion. Raise your hands at any time with questions, and we have 3 other rabbis in attendance. Don't be shy about filling in what I miss. So go to people. God forbid I get something wrong. But does everyone have the hand? Yes? What? Perfect. All right, how's that? Better?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want an exam? All right, then All right. So everybody has the hand up? Yep. All right, very good. So very often with Jewish holidays, we learn a lot from the name or names, and that's certainly the case here. So Hanukkah itself, Chag Hanukkah means a feast or festival of dedication or rededication. And most Hebrew words come from 3-letter roots. We call it a shoresh. And here we have the chet, the nun, and the chaf is the root of the word Hanukkah, which seems to mean some kind of focused energy. Sometimes it's used for education, and it can mean to commit or recommit oneself. And so you can see why this is called Hanukkah. It's the rededication of the temple. As I said, Friday evening, Erev Shabbat, it's the rededication of the second Beit HaMikdash, the second house of God. Remember, the first one was built by King Solomon, roughly around 960, 970 BCE, and lasted over 3.5 centuries, and was destroyed by the armies of Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonian Empire, or the Neo-Babylonian Empire, either in 587 or 586 BCE, and then many of the peoples were taken away and brought east to Babylonia, which is the name of the kingdom that more or less 1,000 years before was called Mesopotamia, and we now would call, for the most part, Iraq. And so there they lived, and the prophet Ezekiel went with them, and there they were about 50 years when the Neo-Babylonian Empire was destroyed by the Persians, the Persian Empire, the great Emperor Koresh, we call Cyrus the Great in English, and he allowed not just the Jews but all the peoples that had been enslaved by the Babylonians to return to their ancestral homelands as long as they saw themselves as good Persian citizens and paid taxes. The Persians didn't mind so much, and as a result they built the largest empire the world had known up to that time. And so it was for the Jews and what we could call Judah or Judea. They lived under Persian rule for a couple of centuries, more or less happily, at least in terms of comparing Jewish history. And the Persian Empire then was destroyed very quickly by a military genius out of Macedonia, whose father took over Greece. We all know who I'm talking about, the Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great, as a young man, I think his father Philip was assassinated when he was about 20, and he resolved not only to conquer just Greece, but to spread Greek culture through the known world. And there's reason to believe that he started out with that mission. Remember, as a teenager, does anyone know who his tutor was? Aristotle. Talk about pressure, not doing your homework. And it seems to be that kind of in the middle of his rampage through Persian lands, he came to feel that he was creating a new civilization, kind of a mixture of Greek and Persian civilization. There's reason to believe that was so because he insisted on, he took a Persian wife, Roxanne, I think she was Bactrian actually, and part of the Persian Empire, insisted that all his Macedonian generals and officers take Persian wives and have Persian families. And so Hellenism became something even different than just spreading Greek culture. It was the mixing of Greek culture and local cultures. This was very important in world history. It profoundly changed Judaism. It made Christianity what it is. And he even went as far as India. So there is Greco-Hindu and Greco-Buddhist architecture and art that has been recovered. So extremely important individual in world history and in Jewish history, and very pertinent to the story of Hanukkah, because Alexander went to the east of the Indus River into Indian civilization, and his troops mutinied. They said they'd had enough. Who knows how far further east he would have gone if it was up to him. And so he reluctantly turned back west, went back to Babylonia, got very drunk and partied for a couple of weeks, and apparently died of partying.
Rabbi, would you remind us what changes to Judaism this caused?
Yes, it's just where I'm going. Exactly right. So, Hellenism in Judaism. So really, before Alexander, the Jews of ancient Israel knew of the Greeks. There was some trade back and forth, but not very much. As a result of Alexander the Great and after, the Jewish world, let's talk about Jerusalem and its environs. After a few decades of turmoil after Alexander died, became under the influence of the Greek Egyptians first. And the general, the Macedonian general, who took over Egypt was a man named Ptolemy. And Ptolemy created a dynasty that lasted hundreds of years, was very wealthy. Alexandria became possibly the biggest city in the world, or one of them for sure. Very advanced and had a very large Jewish population, actually, at least a third. And there's some scholars that think maybe even half, at one point, or almost half the population of Alexandria was Jewish. It's still an important city in Egypt to this day. I think 4 to 5 million people live there. You may remember the movie Cleopatra. Rex Harrison comes to meet Elizabeth Taylor, remember? And the library goes up in flames. Well, that was Julius Caesar with his dalliance with Cleopatra. There is an idea that the Romans, under Julius, set fire to the Library of Alexandria. Another image you may have, do you remember Cosmos with Carl Sagan?
Yeah.
He had, my favorite part of it was he put himself in the Library of Alexandria and reconstructed what it was like. It wasn't all destroyed in one disaster, though. It took over hundreds of years. There was a fire when the Romans were there under Julius Caesar, but there were other fires. The library was not all exactly in one place. It was more complicated than that, the way history almost always is. But the library was eventually destroyed. Now this is another lecture, fascinating lecture for another time. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Septuagint. So the Septuagint, which is Greek for the 70, says this was in the time of the Ptolemies, about the year 250, that the rabbis were taken, but scholars were invited to Alexandria from Jerusalem and other places in Eretz Israel, and to come and translate the Torah, which they have in the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, into Greek. And they did translate into Greek. According to the story, there were 70 or 72 separate scholars working individually in individual copies, and they came up with not just similar translations into Greek from the Hebrew, but exact translations. And that would be a nes, that would be a miracle, right? And the Septuagint was very important in the development of the Bible for Jews, because it was used by Greek-speaking Jews in the Hellenistic world for centuries, especially Philo of Alexandria, who was the only really ancient Jewish philosopher of note. And he read the Torah and other biblical books in Greek. Also, just as important, very important in world history, this Septuagint was the original Old Testament for the Christians, and for hundreds of years. The reason why Christianity is the way it is, and based on Judaism, is they used the Septuagint as their basic Bible, and then built what became known as the New Testament on top of that. And that's what happened historically. Well, yes, Rabbi.
About the word Hanukkah, dedication, rededication. I'm not sure where I'm getting this from, and Leica might be helpful on this. Isn't Chinuch also the Hebrew term used to start the Enlightenment, the Outthera?
The what?
Chinuch, the Enlightenment, the Outthera.
The
period of history known as Enlightenment.
Enlightenment is Haskalah. Haskalah. Yeah, you know the English name Haskell comes from that. The root there means to illumination, I think. Chinuch does mean education as well. Yeah.
Comes from Hanok.
Yeah, so the Ptolemies took over the land of Israel, and especially Jerusalem, and Jerusalem became a polis from the get our word politics and political. And like Athens, Corinth, Sparta were polises. So indeed was Jerusalem. And under the Ptolemies, many Jews took to Greek philosophy and culture and literature and the drama hook, line, and sinker. And others, not so much. They saw it as a threat. But even those Jews accepted kind of through a cultural filter many Greek ideas and words. Indeed, in the Talmud, there are thousands of words that are Greek loanwords. And not only that, but you take like the Passover Seder, the word afikomen is Greek for dessert. And the whole idea of having a historical meal where you learn as you eat, or you're waiting to eat for hours and hours, is obviously patterned after the symposium. Some of you may remember, like I. Claudius, the Romans learned, with the grapes, and they're all lounging around. That's why we misubim, we shlop at the Seder table. It comes from the Greeks, clearly comes from the Greeks. So, yes?
I understand the word synagogue is Greek.
Definitely. Absolutely Greek. So, synagogue, synagogos means the place where you come together to learn. The Hebrew equivalent would be Beit Midrash or Beit HaMidrash. Yes, absolutely. Yes, many of our words come from the Greek, and the Jewish genius has always been to bring the best ideas from the surrounding cultures in without bringing in too much so that we dissipate. And it's always a dialectic or a struggle. And that was probably most true with Greek culture more than any other. Also from the Romans we get the idea of law being organized. And so the halakha was organized in a Mishnah, right, which is an organization. And that definitely was influenced by Roman ideas of order in the law. Even though in the Talmud and the Gemara it gets all messed up again. But for a while we had it in an orderly fashion. So classical civilization, Greco-Roman civilization, is a big, big part of this story. So any questions about that before we get to the Seleucids and all the fun? So the Ptolemies were not particularly tyrannical, as these things go. I mean, they weren't the nicest guys either, but they weren't too bad. They didn't push things too far. Kind of like the Persians, if the Jews and the other people under their control behaved and sent them taxes, they didn't push it, what they were doing at home, what they were doing in the temple. Wisely, they didn't push it. And they were, so Ptolemy was one of the generals going back to Alexander the Great. When Alexander was dying, he very foolishly said, or vainly said, who should be the great emperor after you of this new empire, indeed the largest empire the world had seen up to that time? And he said, the best general. Well, how do generals decide who is the best general telephones? So they fight, right? So they fought each other, and that's how Alexander's giant empire broke up into pieces. Several pieces. It's a complicated story. Two of those pieces became important in Jewish history. The Ptolemies were one, and the second group was the Seleucids. And indeed, so another one of Alexander's generals' name was Seleucus, and he took over the eastern part of the empire, actually the largest part of what had been Alexander's empire. And his empire was the Seleucid Empire, which also lasted hundreds of years, not quite as long as the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies went all the way down to Cleopatra and ended with her suicide. The Seleucids, not quite that long, but a long time, a bigger empire even than the Ptolemies, based in Antioch. And after him came, there was a great king named Antiochus III. And it was his son, Antiochus IV, who becomes the main villain of the Hanukkah story. So the Seleucids had a different idea than the Ptolemies. Yes, they wanted the money, but they were more totalitarian. They weren't just authoritarian. Give us your money and behave, and we don't care what you think. Right? We care what you do, but we don't care that much what you're thinking about, or what you do on your own in your religious life. So for the Seleucids, I mean, this is anachronistic, but they would be more like what we call today totalitarian. No, we want your hearts and minds. We want you to worship the Greek gods and worship Antiochus IV. So he called himself in Greek Epiphanes, which means I am God manifest. So, which is a little bold, but, and he insisted, even more than his father did, and the Seleucid kings before him, that the Jews literally bended to him as a minor deity, and he pressed forward the Greek pantheon of Olympus that we all know, and put a statue of Zeus in the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, and to crush the spirit of the Jews. So that Antiochus IV decided on a war, yes, against the Jews, but even more against Judaism itself. And so it's been said, like the Purim story is a story of genocide, of attempted genocide. Haman, like the Nazis, wanted to wipe out the Jews in the Persian Empire. This was hundreds of years before this story. Then the second story of the Seleucids was more like the Soviet Union. They wanted to crush Judaism so that the Jews would become, in the case of the Soviets, the communists, in this case, Hellenizers, Hellenistic people. Totally. They all partially wasn't good enough. And so that it was just a different ideology, what we would call ideology. And there was an extreme reaction to it, to say the least. Any questions about that? It's all by way of background. Questions or comments, of course, and anything. Yes?
What is the situation of the Jews at that time under his rule? Were they divided? Were they?
Yes.
Were they?
Yes.
Yeah. How
The Jews themselves were very much divided. And as far as I can tell, Rabbi and I were talking about this yesterday. As far as I can tell, based on my research for today, like Mattathias, he killed somebody. Who did he kill? Some of the stories, he killed a Seleucid official, others a Jew who was a Hellenizing Jew who was bowing to a statue of a Greek god, or even Antiochus himself. It's the best guy. According to some stories, he kills two people in Modin. He kills both a Seleucid official and a Jew who was bending the knee to some kind of Greek idol in Modin and igniting a revolution. That, and as far as we can tell, it was in about 167 BCE that occurred. And this is the part, but the Jewish world in Jerusalem, in Eretz Israel, which we can call Judah at this time, and in other places in the Jewish world, was divided. Even under the Ptolemies in Alexandria, there were bitter arguments over to what extent Greek culture should be accepted. There were really, as far as I can tell, very few Jews who thought not at all. like the Satmar of their time, not at all. It's kind of similar to American Judaism in that regard. Even most Orthodox accept a lot of our civilization. You can see, like you go to New York, you go to the Museum of Natural History, you'll see yeshiva bookers looking at skeletons of the Brontosaurus, right? So they accept, who knows what they're teaching about it, but to some extent, our civilization is accepted by almost all Jews. And that was the case back then. Rabbi?
Was it more a civil war of words and ideas, or a civil war in the actual sense of swords?
It was a civil war of ideas. There were fears that it would be a civil war period. There was some violence, though, as far as I can tell, but it never became a full-out civil war. But it was definitely true. Look, so Jews, since time immemorial, have been what we call in Yiddish sneezedik, right? We like to be humble and modest. So, you know what a gymnasium is? Gymnos is Greek for naked. And so, like those statues of the Greeks, men would exercise naked, and literally naked, or almost naked, and which isn't nice for Judaism even in that era. But a lot of Jews did that. They went to the gymnasium and things like that. They were open to the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle and ideas that the rabbis didn't think were very nice. And especially, the word Epicorus means Epicurean, because the Epicureans were atomists and believed the universe was created all these combinations of atoms, and from that we get Epicorus, which in Hebrew and in Yiddish, which means what? Heretic. Yes.
Is there any evidence that these Hellenized Jews who were competing in the gymnasium went so far as to abandon circumcision?
Yeah, there is such evidence, yes.
Because they would have, otherwise they would have looked very different.
Yes, exactly right. You're exactly right. Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, and I didn't hear Rabbi back, so maybe he said this first, but weren't there some Jews, when they were competing naked in the gymnasium, that they wanted to try to reverse their circumcision?
I think that's right. I don't know how that could have been done. I think I've heard that.
There were Jews in Europe during the Nazi period trying to do the same thing.
Well, and for very good reason, yeah. But I think I've heard it, yeah. But yes.
This is before Christ.
Yes, Jesus was probably born around the year 6 BC, believe it or not the year 1. So all these events.
He was ahead of his time.
So, oh, very good. So it's about 160 years before the birth of Jesus that these events began to take place. Yeah, he was ahead of his time. Literally. Yes, other questions, comments? Rabbi.
Are you going to get into how the Syrians got involved in appointing high priests? How the Syrians were involved in appointing the Kohen Gadol, the high priests, and that there were high priests who were more sympathetic to Hellenism?
Yeah, that's an important part of the story, like the Onians. So the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem, became a political football. Under the Ptolemies and the Seleucids and later the Romans. It went on for quite a while, yes, that's right. Under the Maccabees as well. When the Maccabees, I talked about that Friday, of course, when the Maccabees came to power, and they themselves, for the most part, accepted Greek civilization more and more. And they started as high priests and became what was called in Greek the basileus, or king. They became kings of the polis and then saw themselves as mini emperors, especially said their critics and people like Yochanan Hyrcanus and Alexander Yanai, and then the queen, Ptolemy Alexandra. For the most part, the people, this is under the Greeks and the Maccabees, the Hasmoneans, became divided between two major political and religious parties, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and which of course has a New Testament ring to it to many people, because they made up the Sanhedrin, another Greek word which represents like the large national legislature and court, and became very much involved in politics. I would say overall, although not always, the Pharisees were opposed to the Maccabees. But the Pharisees, along with the Sadducees, even the Pharisees accepted a lot of Greek ideas, incorporated them in and mixed with biblical civilization to create something new, what became in time Rabbinic Judaism.
Is there a connection between Pharisee and Pharisee?
Well, Pharisee comes from Perush. The root means to separate. Pei raised shin, which means to separate, because the Pharisees separated themselves from the public because of laws of cleanliness and kashrut. But ironically, they became the champions of the people in Judah or Judea who didn't live on the farm. So think about it. So in the Torah, how do you get close to God? You bring a korban, and there the root of korban, sacrifice, also means to draw close, right? So the korban you offer, usually an animal or sometimes a libation offering, crop offering to get close to God, especially an animal offering. But the blood goes down into the earth and the smoke goes up to God, right? The fire. And it's very hard for us to connect with this way of getting close to God, I admit. But that's how it was. And first, yesterday, when I was talking, I gave the Devar at Temple Israel, talked about the Mishkan, and the menorah and the Mishkan, the sanctuary of God, then the Temple of Solomon, then the Second Temple, and then overlapping the Second Temple and after the synagogues, where we no longer have the korbanot, but we have the idea of sacrifice as a way to get close to God. This idea is very ancient Hebrew idea of how to get close to God. So what was the question?
I was wondering if there was a connection to the words Pharisee.
Oh, right. Okay.
Pharisee.
So that's what I was asked. So thanks. So the Pharisees represented all those people who lived in towns, especially Jerusalem, the big town, who didn't have farms and couldn't bring animals. How did they get close to God? Well, the Sadducees said, too bad. The Torah says what it says. We have Torah Shebichtav, or written Torah, and that's what we follow. The Pharisees were the first to announce the Torah Shebichtav, the oral Torah. The oral Torah, which went from Moses to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders to the men of the Great Assembly, eventually into the midst of Amcha, the people Israel, and eventually it was written down in the Mishnah 15 centuries later. So the oral Torah was first discovered, Perush, by the Pharisees. And the Sadducees said, no, you made it up. No. You made it up. But for the people who lived in Jerusalem, this was a revelation to them. We can get close to God without having a farm, without bringing animals. We self-sacrifice, a spiritual sacrifice, takes the place of the korban, the animal sacrifice, or even the offering of grain. So that's why the Pharisees became more and more popular and among the people, and a threat to the Sadducees, who were the priestly group who represented the temple in Jerusalem, and they were mostly against each other. Though by the time you get to the New Testament and the trial of Jesus, they were kind of together. Though on the whole, from the writers of the Gospels, it was the Pharisees who became the main villains of the story. But for hundreds of years, it was Pharisees versus Sadducees. And that particular argument was ended when the Second Temple was destroyed. And everybody mourned the destruction of the Second Temple at the hands of the Romans, but the Pharisees prospered. They mourned, but they prospered, because without the Second Temple, there was no place to bring the korbanot, the sacrifices to God of animals of various kinds, spoken of in Leviticus, in the first part of Leviticus. And so what happened as a result, the Sadducees dwindled away within like a decade. They're almost gone. The Pharisees became the rabbis. Pharisaic Judaism became rabbinical Judaism as a result of the destruction of the Second Temple. And what happened in the Hanukkah story is part of that development. So in the time of Judah Maccabee, there were already glimmers of this division between Pharisee and Sadducee. But it hadn't fully developed yet. Remember, this was a time when the old religion was changing under the influence of Persia already. Aramaic became the spoken language of the Maccabees. The word Maccabee is Aramaic for hammer. And so with that linguistic change came a lot of changes, even before the Greek. Because Aramaic was one form of Aramaic was the language of the Persian Empire, their main language. And so things were changing greatly. Even though the Persians took over Judah in biblical times, late biblical times, that was the biggest change, the linguistic change. So ironically, Judah Maccabee and Hillel and Shammai and Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Judah Hanasi, all these great luminaries, not to mention Jesus and the apostles, all spoke Aramaic, not Hebrew, or at least not Hebrew most of the time. So that was already a huge change. And then with the influx of Greek and Roman civilization, biblical Israel, as it was, biblical Israel based on the priesthood and prophecy came to an end. And what replaced it was a new religion, the religion of the rabbis, which preserved a lot of biblical religion, but everything was in a new context. And it preserved what it could. So instead of the Aron HaBrit, the Ark of the Covenant, we have the Aron HaKodesh. This Ark, we have all the vestiges, the Ner Tamid, eternal light, the menorah, which is not a Chanukiah, but a menorah. And the Torah itself has on it the breastplate and the mantle and the sash and all these things which had previously been part of the Kohen Gadol's holy clothing, the Kitvei Kodesh, as we call it, the Big Day Kodesh, I mean. And we went to the Torah itself. Imagine that. So the temple cult, as it was transferred to the Torah itself. That's our new Kohen Gadol, our new high priest in a sense. Yeah, that's what happened. In all these ingenious ways, the rabbis took what they saw as the will of God as reflected through the priesthood and prophecy. Prophecy did come to an end. Prophecy ended with like Malachi and Zechariah. But the priesthood continued, but the Kohen, what is a Kohen and Levites to get, you know, there's the priestly blessing and they get the first two aliyahs. Very good, Rabbi. You look like Mr. Spock. Rabbi, like, just like Mr. Spock, live long and prosper. Well, actually, Leonard Nimoy, he got that from. He grew up very traditionally Jewish. His cousin was part of my congregation.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, when I was at Temple Beth David in Gwinnett County, and yeah, so when Star Trek came out, he said everybody in the neighborhood went to the Nimoys. And his mother's like, "What's this Mishigas? He's a man from space." For years, but he did use. He got that from the priest. Yeah, Birkat HaKohanim, the priestly blessing. That's right. So the Jews, the rabbis they worked so hard. You can see them working to preserve whatever they could in a rapidly changing world. Of course, the world's always changing, but in the time of the Greeks and the Romans, it was changing fast. Other people in the world were struggling in the same way. That's why Hellenism, the Greek civilization, was a very, very powerful change agent world civilization. Look at the Romans. The Romans conquered Greece politically, but culturally, Greece conquered Rome. They accepted almost everything from Greece, including their gods and goddesses, and they gave them different names, but almost everything. They recognized the superior civilization, even though they conquered them, you know, in a few years. So, very strange. It's amazing how seductive Greek civilization was to everybody who came into contact with it, whether they conquered Greece or Greece conquered them. And that's true of the Jews, and even more so of the Christians, even though very traditional Christians don't like it put this way, that Christianity is a very fine blend of biblical ideas and Greek ideas, and blended together in a way which, let's face it, has been extremely successful. In Judaism, there was more resistance than Christianity to Greek civilization, but still enormous penetration, including the Passover Seder. What could be more Jewish than a Passover Seder? But the whole idea of a Seder, the word, also from the Hebrew, Samech Daled Resh, means an ordered meal. Well, who has an ordered meal? Well, the Greeks and the Romans. That's where the symposium comes from. There was a question?
I may be fast forwarding too much. When did the cultural differences between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazi take place?
Oh yes, so that's a different thing. So definitely not yet. So Ashkenaz is in Sepharad. There are words that are found in the Tanakh, you know, the Torah and the Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Jewish Bible, which we can call Hebrew Scriptures, because over 90% of it is in Hebrew, 5% or more is in Aramaic, but it's mostly Hebrew Bible. And the word Ashkenaz came to mean Central Europe, or roughly Germany. And Sepharad came to mean the Iberian Peninsula, Greece and Portugal. And so what happened in time was, so far as we know, the Jews came from Eretz Yisrael to Italy, and the Jews from Italy and Provence went up into Central Europe and developed Yiddish alongside the development of German, and later, because of terrible persecutions, went east to the Slavic lands, and they became known as the Ashkenazi Jews. And there are other Jews, possibly some from Israel, but mostly actually from Babylonia, seem to have gone to the Iberian Peninsula, to Spain and to a lesser extent Portugal. They developed their own civilization. They became in time Sephardic Jews. And Sephardic, when I was a kid, also was like a large kind of designation for non-Ashkenazi Jews. But now it's, and properly I think, there's a division between Sephardic, which are called Mizrahi Jews, which are Eastern Jews, except that they're not all in the East. A lot of them are in North African places like Morocco, which is like culturally the East. Like think of the paintings of Delacroix, of Morocco, and that's the East. Well, not geographically, but culturally it was considered the East. So very roughly we have Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews, though Mizrahi also can be, and often is subdivided. And, these divisions are problematic even among Ashkenazi Jews. A lot of German Jews don't see it like they have all that much in common with the Jews from Poland and Russia. There's plenty of that going on in New York. You read our crowd, it looks like plenty of that. So it used to be that not anymore, but Reform Judaism was really German Jewish, and conservative Judaism became like Polish Jewish. And both Ashkenazi.
What does that all have to do with Hanukkah?
It doesn't have anything to do with it.
I just wanted to make sure we're
No,
too far afield on this.
No, we've gone far afield there, so.
Yeah, they're asking.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder, you mentioned on Friday the difference between the military aspect of Hanukkah and the lighting the candles in the Talmud, and I was wondering, like, the Jews, the Seleucids were much weaker than the Romans, so that rebellion could succeed with difficulty. But then they tried the same tactic against the Romans, which was basically hopeless. So the Hanukkah story, I thought at that point they tried to modify it because you can't follow that model.
I didn't give that reason when in my sermon. I gave other reasons for the rabbis didn't like the Maccabees very much, but you're right. So the Judah Maccabee became, to some extent, the inspiration for the Great Revolt against Rome, 66 to 73, which ended catastrophically with Masada, the suicide of Masada. And the Kitos Rebellion in North Africa, when Trajan was emperor, about 117 BC, which we don't know as much about, also catastrophic. And finally, the Bar Kokhba Rebellion back in Jerusalem and the land of Israel at that time, 132 to 135. You're quite right. So the idea of a Maccabean-like revolution against the Romans did not work 3 times, and was catastrophic for the Jews. That's absolutely correct. That's a good point. Yes, Rabbi Martin.
Would you say that the Maccabean war against Antiochus, which resulted in the rededication of the temple, and 20 years later, maybe the establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty, that it was a coalition of Jews that broke apart, a coalition of...
Oh, that's interesting.
...of nationalistic people and of pious people who were
well,
what they called Hasidim.
Yeah, because under the Maccabees, most of the Jews rallied to their cause for those few years. But there was a definite division in the Hasmonean dynasty, the Maccabee dynasty, which lasted roughly 80 years. In that period, you have the definite development of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they were definitely at loggerheads. And later under the Romans, even more, the Zealots appeared, who ended up on Masada. The Sicari, the daggermen who would stab Pharisees they didn't like. And the Essenes, who said, the heck with all of you, and went out to the desert. But that was in the future. But all that started not during the Maccabean revolt, but under the Hasmonean dynasty. Yes, that's right. Yes, sir.
Are you going to talk about the most recent Hanukkah miracle?
Which is?
Last night, the Bears, in the last 5 minutes, came back 10 points down, won in overtime against the Green Bay Packers. Go Bears!
Neskadol Hayasha. All right, other questions or comments? All right, so this rebellion took place in Modi'in. There still is a Modi'in in Israel to this day. I think it's near the Ben Gurion airport. And Mattathias and his 5 sons. Judah Maccabee was the middle son. Maccabee, as I said, is Aramaic for hammer. We talked about how the Hasmonean was the family name of the Maccabees. And later, this is a perfect case of the rabbis trying to preserve whatever they can from the past. They took the menorah, which I talked about this yesterday in my Devar Torah, which goes all the way back to the tabernacle in the desert, the Mishkan. The word Mishkan, the root, it means the dwelling place, the place where God dwells. So, as the Shofeinah. Yes, and the Shekhinah, the presence of God amongst us. That's what the Mishkan was. An important symbol was the menorah. The menorah, which was in the first temple that King Solomon built, 10 of them, and 1 golden menorah in the second temple, and in every synagogue and temple, pretty much, there are menorah, and they are not exactly the same as they were in the second temple because we want to differentiate to one degree or another. So it was this menorah which the Maccabees lit, and when they rededicated the temple to the worship of God, and later as I said, Friday, the rabbis added or discovered, if you wish, the story of the cruse of oil, which miraculously lasted 8 days. So there are 2 stories of Hanukkah, as I said Friday, the military victory and the miracle of the cruse of oil. The same sages lifted from the prophet Zechariah, not by might, not by power, by my spirit, said the Lord of hosts, as one of the messages of Hanukkah, a message of spiritual enlightenment, which, as I said, I much prefer myself, being a peaceful, peace-loving person, but the world is as it is, as we have found out yet again. So, this special menorah is called what? Hanukkah. And, of course, it was developed later, we're not sure exactly when, and it has 9 branches rather than 7. Why does a regular menorah have 7?
7 days of the
Yes, because of the story of creation going all the way back to Bereshit. 7 is a very powerful number in Judaism. That's right. All right, questions about that before we go on to the dreidel? Called in Hebrew a sivivon, thing that goes around. The first name for it in Yiddish was probably from the German trendel. So remember these Jews who came up from Italy into Central Europe, When did they come? Probably around between 800 and 1000 in the 9th century. They came up into Central Europe. There were peoples there. This was still the Dark Ages, if you will. They were developing German, the Gentiles that were there, and the Jews who went up there developed a similar language of Yiddish. So Deutsch, Yiddish, which is Germanic for Jewish, Dutch, all developed at about the same time. And they came with, there was this top that they were already spinning. There is an idea maybe it came from England, it goes way back, but certainly the Jews that came from Italy were already spinning tops, and they were called trendle, and in reference to Hanukkah. And from trendle later in Eastern Europe became dreidel. There is a Yiddish game that's played with the letters Neska, Nun Gimel Hey Shin, representing kind of a gambling game for Hanukkah Gel. Various Yiddish words are associated with the 4 letters. For a nun, you could be niched name. You don't get anything. Gimel could be gums. You get it all. You get the whole pot, and like that. Hey and shin, the different rules for each letter. Either you get the gelt, or you have to put in halb for hey, usually half. You get half the pot, and shin for stella, which means you put in. So that was the game that developed over time. Demei Hanukkah is the Hanukkah gelt, which is developed, we believe, in Eastern Europe and Slavic lands. Yes?
Now, I've heard that in Israel it's Neska Bel Hayah.
Oh, great miracle happened
What's
here.
up with dreidel there?
Yeah, that's right. Neska Bel Hayah. So it was in Eastern Europe that we have the latkes, and called in Hebrew livivot, pancakes, and the livivot go back to ancient Israel and were modified by the Ashkenazi Jews in Eastern Europe. So there you have it, so the connection with Ashkenazi and Sephardic. What most of our Hanukkah customs comes from Ashkenazi Judaism, and in particular East Ashkenazi Judaism and Yiddish civilization as it developed in Eastern Europe. Yes?
With the Hanukkah gel, my father was born in Russia in 1914, a little gel. He said that your mother would make you a little pouch, and your relatives would each put 1 coin in that pouch.
Yeah. Yes. So there are all these variations on the game. The gelt is called in Hebrew Demei Hanukkah, and gelt, of course, from gold. And they used to play with silver and gold at one time, or copper, and then copper coins, and then chocolate. So now it's chocolate made to look like silver and gold. And all this happened in the past 100 years or so, the chocolate part. But the Hanukkah gelt at one time did mean Hanukkah gold, to the extent they had any little tiny coins, but not in Eastern Europe.
Is the dreidel thing a big thing among the Sephardim as well?
To my knowledge, it comes from Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I
don't know if they, that's a good question.
Because what I'm wondering is if, the severity of the winters is quite different in most Ashkenazi territories than it is in most Sephardic lands.
Yeah, that's true.
So you got to do what you got to do to get through it.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And there's also a Hanukkah Megillah. A Megillah is a scroll. We think of the Megillat Esther for what holiday? Purim. Well, there are all kinds of connections between Purim and Hanukkah. One is a Hanukkah Megillah refers to what's sometimes called the Megillat Antiochus, a text that recounts the story of the Maccabees' revolt against the Hellenizing Greeks of Syria, the Seleucids, and the rededication of the temple as we talked about. It's unlike the Megillat Esther, the Esther scroll on Purim. It's not part of the Hebrew Bible. Remember, the book of Esther is. And it's not required by halakha for Hanukkah as the book of Purim is. So the book, it's optional, and it is read by more Sephardic communities, actually.
Oh, wow.
Interestingly enough. So it tells the story of Hanukkah. What we have in Maccabees 1. Maccabees 1. One thing I should say, I haven't said yet, is that let's talk a little bit of Maccabees 2, 3, and 4. Actually, I found like 8 books of the Maccabees, but 5, 6, 7, and 8 are medieval and have nothing to do with Hanukkah. They just got excited by the name. So we'll forget about those. Now, Maccabees 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all part of some Bible, so let's see if I got this right. For Jews, none of the books of the Maccabees are part of our Bible, ironically enough, as I said Friday. For Roman Catholics, the first 2 are part of their Bible. For the Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, 3 books are part of their Bible, and for what's called the Slavonic Bible, which I really don't know exactly what that is, 4 books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's complicated. The first book of the Maccabees, scholars believe, was indeed written originally in Hebrew, but we only have it in the Greek. Books 2, 3, and 4 were written originally in the Greek. Maccabees 2, it's about martyrdom, a lot about martyrdom, about the poor woman and her 7 sons who died rather than bending the knee to Antiochus. It's about deeply held beliefs, dying for the beliefs, and resurrection of the dead as a hopeful reward for being true to God. But it's not really a historical account like Maccabees 1. It's not history so much as a number of stories about Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of God, as it later was called. That's Maccabees 2. Maccabees 3 really doesn't have anything to do with the Maccabean revolt per se. It's about Egypt and how the Jews of Egypt were saved from plots to destroy them. Kind of like the story of Purim. And there were pogroms in Ptolemaic Egypt, in Alexandria. So it's based on real-life worries and events. Maccabees 4 is fascinating. It's not historical at all. It's a book of philosophy. It's based on the connection between reason and faith. And the martyrdom stories of the Maccabees are illustrations of how reason and faith can connect or sometimes clash with each other. So those are the 4 books of the Maccabees. None of them are in our Bible. None of the 4. Ironically enough.
Yes. Are the latter ones the product of the Hasmonean period?
So these books, you mean through 2, 3, and 4?
I mean, did the Hasmoneans bring them out kind of self-promotion?
No, none of, well, maybe the first one, actually, the first one. Maccabees 1, yeah. The others, so far as we know, not. But I think the first book of the Maccabees is from the Hasmonean period. It's clearly written by a Jew. But from the Christian view of the Maccabees, wasn't heroic. The Christian view of the Maccabees came in time to be connected to Second Maccabees, about the woman and her 7 sons and other stories of martyrdom. So that the word in French and then in English, macabre, having to do with death, comes from Maccabee, according to most linguists, yeah. So it's a very, I know this is counterintuitive. Hanukkah is about fun holiday, you know, holiday of light, and latkes, and dreidels, and chocolate, and all that, but the word, it's ironic, isn't it, that one irony is that neither Maccabees 2 or 1 is part of the Jewish Bible, but many Christian Bibles. The other is that that the Maccabees will remember it's a very gloomy story in Western civilization generally, especially because Christians focused on Second Maccabees, really. Remember, it was part of the Catholic Bible.
So the probable source of 3 and 4?
Pardon?
What's the probable source of 3 and 4?
I have to look these up. I think that they're definitely Greek and somewhat later, and it's not completely clear. Let's see if I can find
So they're almost kind of borderline pseudepigrapha rather than apocrypha.
Yes, and they are, right, so Maccabees 1, 2, 3, and 4 are part of what Protestants would later call apocrypha, hidden books. But, so what's the difference between apocrypha and pseudepigrapha?
Well, pseudepigrapha are things that were written, made to look and sound like of a certain period, but much later.
Exactly right. So, but
a lot of shadiness in the publishing industry.
yeah. So a lot of these books, the authorship is really not known, but they come out of the Greco-Roman period, and the fact that they were originally written in Greek means either they were written by non-Jews or a thoroughly Hellenized Jew, except for Maccabees 1, which they believe was originally written in Hebrew. So the books of the Apocrypha were picked this was Martin Luther and the people, the theologians of his time. They took out the books that they thought were not originally written in Hebrew and took that out of the Bible, the Old Testament, to differentiate themselves from the Catholics. And they took out all 3 of the books of the Maccabees found in the Catholic Bible. They were changing the Catholic Bible to make the Protestant Bible. And other books like Tobit, Bel and the Dragon, Judith, they put in this separate category called Apocrypha, which is Greek for hidden books. Now, in some Protestant Bibles, if you look at the table of contents, they'll include the Apocrypha, but it's not canon. C-A-N-O-N, 1 N. It's not Holy Writ. It is a separate section of books which are interesting and might inspire you, but not the Word of God. And for reasons we've talked about, it's clear why the rabbis eventually did not include any of the books of the Maccabees, even though they were in the Septuagint. See, that's what's interesting. Certainly, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. There was more than one version of the Septuagint. They were in the Septuagint. Now, the Septuagint, under the Ptolemies, started as just the Torah, right? The 72, according to the story. It's a miracle. They're all exactly the same. And they go in the library. But more books were being added over the centuries. So that when we went to rabbinical school, Rabbi March, I bet you learned this too, that at Yavna, Yochanan ben Zakkai got the rabbis together and they created the Tanakh, pretty much. That's what was thought by, that's what I learned, but That's what most of the books said, but in the intervening decades, scholars think that's probably not the case. The truth is, we don't know when the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, came to be the way it is. We know that by Talmudic times it was done. That's what we know. We know the Torah came first, and the prophets came second, and the writings did come third, but we don't know how or exactly when, especially the writings. We really don't know. And we just have to live with that. But we do know the Christians, it was about the year 367, there was a letter by a bishop that names all the books in our Old Testament. So I know it hurts, but that's where we get it. So maybe by the 360s, indirectly we know that the Jews had their Bible, as well as the Christians had settled Bibles, but we can't be sure of that. There's no Jewish text I know of that names them all before medieval times, because we're just not into that so much, except for the Mishnah, just very organized columns of things. Then we went back to we had the Mishnah, we organized everything, and then it became a mishmash again for centuries, until Maimonides of the Mishnah Torah, and he tried to organize. There's kind of that back and forth in Judaism as well, yeah. Okay, questions, comments?
One more question.
Yes.
We know that Maccabee is Aramaic for Hammer, but there's also a story, and I wonder whether it's legend or sheer coincidence, that Maccabee is the first letters of Mi Kamacha by Mi Adonai.
Yes.
And it was from the flags.
Yes. Yes, that is, there's definitely that midrash that's what it means. Well, maybe it has a double meaning for that. Yeah, hammer and as in across it. Yeah, I have heard that too. Okay, other questions or comments? So the Seder Nerot, the order for the lighting of the candles, we follow Beit Hillel, the school of Hillel, and not Beit Shammai, the school of Shammai, as we've talked about. So we add a lamp each night rather than detract. We go from 1 to 8, not 8 to 1, which is a good thing. It wouldn't be nearly as cheery a holiday otherwise. We have the 3 brachas of Hanukkah, Shol Hanukkah, La'aseh, Nisim, Lavotenu, Bayamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh, and the first night, the Shefiyanu prayer. There is another prayer. You know what I'm talking, right? So the first prayer is, I praise God, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through his commandments and commanded us regarding the light of Hanukkah. Originally a lamp, later mostly candles. Bless you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, that made miracles for our fathers and mothers in those times, but at this season of the year, and then the Shefiyanu prayer. I'd like to add from the Talmud, Hanerot halalu anachnu madlikim. We light these candles in order to remember the wonderful saving of our fathers and mothers during the days when priests were leaders of the people. This is the Kohen Gadol. Yes, Rabbi.
There's a problem with the first blessing because God did not command us to light the lights of Hanukkah.
Well,
nowhere is it. Nowhere.
It's a good point.
It's a rabbinic, the whole holiday.
Yeah. No, that's right. I have never thought of that. You're right. So let's take it out. We'll send the word out. No, actually, I'll have to think about that. I had never thought about that. That's right. Because it is not. It's not in the Torah. That's right. I guess they say it's part of oral Torah. Written Torah. Written Torah. That's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. There's written Torah and oral Torah. Written Torah, the 5 books of Moses. The oral Torah is everything else that was given to Moses and added to by the rabbis through all these centuries, and sometimes even the Nevi'im, the prophets of the Ketuvim, the writings are put into oral Torah as well, and I'm sure that would be the explanation, something like that. Because these brachas were developed by the early rabbis, the Tanaim, the first group of rabbis. Yes?
We have a question. So Shammai said to reduce the number of candles every day, and Hill said to increase it. But what about like when you put in the candles, you're supposed to start from
Line them up and
right to left.
As you're facing.
Yeah, but where did that, is that Shammai and Hill or is that something else?
No, that developed at some point. I don't know if there's if we know if there's if there's a text that was originally, or just a minhag, a tradition that developed over time.
Shammai is actually the more compelling, right?
Yes, it is.
The miracle of the oil is that you have, and it burns down each night and still lasts 8 nights.
It's more logical.
It makes it more.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
Start with 8 candles and
Yeah.
wait.
I agree. It's more logical, but depressing.
You won't have as many left over at the end of the holiday.
No, I know.
For those nights that you missed.
It's a very compelling argument.
What are you going to do for birthdays?
It's just depressing. And that's how Shammai was. Very logical, but not very inspirational. And Hillel, it's a different message entirely, because light is a symbol of the divine, of warmth, of hope. So you want it to increase, even though you're right, in terms of what we're actually talking about, Shammai makes more sense, which was often the case, but we usually go with Hillel, right? So when priests were leaders of the people, the Kohanim, these lamps are sacred to us through the 8 days of Hanukkah. We are not permitted to use their light. We may look at them so that we may remember to give thanks and to praise your great name for the wonders of this great salvation. And on Hanukkah we also say, Al ha-nisim v'al ha-purgan, v'al ha-gvurot v'al ha-shuot v'al ha-milchamot, she'asita l'avoteinu b'yamim ha'hem b'zman hazeh. We thank you for all the wonders and for this salvation of our fathers and mothers in days of old at this time of the year. The Al ha-nisim prayer, which we also have an Al ha-nisim for Purim. Again, there is the close connection between Purim and Hanukkah. Two kind of obverse sides of the same coin, perhaps, but there really is, it seems like, a deep and ancient connection of how the rabbis saw both holidays. And I think I mentioned that there is an idea that another reason why Hanukkah is 8 days is patterned after Sukkot, which is also 8 days, and that's a theory. It's just a theory. Yes, sir?
I know we celebrate Hanukkah on 25 Kislev. Was there really a Jewish calendar in the days of the Maccabees?
All right, so this is a really good question. Very good question. So, as far as we can tell, the names we have, like Tishrei, Heshron, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Av and Elul, and a couple of this. The names of the holidays come from Babylonia, the Babylonian exile. That's what's generally thought. They seem to be Babylonian. The name Tammuz, I think, was the name of a Babylonian month, which makes perfect sense. And that's where it comes from. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that they were taken in and used immediately. There might have been a transition period that, as far as I know, we don't know much about. We do know by the time we get to the rabbis of what we call the Tanaim, the sages leading up to the Mishnah, like Hillel and Shammai and Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, Meir, and of course Judah Hanasi, all those people, that by that time they were using the names of the months that we know, which are kind of Aramaic and came from Babylon. For example, when does Passover occur? What month? Nisan, just like the car. And originally that was called Aviv, the month of Aviv, the month of spring. Yes, Tel Aviv, by the way, means spring hill. Well, almost like Springfield, actually. And it was changed to, so Aviv was changed to Nisan, which is Babylonian and kind of Aramaic. And that's where we think it comes from. Yes?
Rabbi, I love to hear you talk, but the brain can only retain what the seat can maintain. You might think about wrapping it up.
You're saying that you're Tochasarts. Yes. I'm ready to write.
I disagree. You should continue.
Until I pass out. That would be fun. I don't have much more to go, actually. But what do you think, like another 5, 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 1 minute? All right. So the Ma'o Sur, Rock of Ages, was written by a fellow we don't know much about named Mordecai in the 13th century, and compared Hanukkah to other acts of redemption in the long version, which we never sang, in the acts of redemption in Egypt, in Babylonia, and in Persia. So also Passover and Purim again. And I think I told you about Mi Yamaleah, who can retell is a Zionist song based on Psalm 106. So you should go look at, as for your homework, Psalm 106, and email your summation. I'm not even going to get a single email. So I talked yesterday also about the special Torah portion for Shabbat in Hanukkah, an additional portion for Numbers chapter 7. Rabbi Marx also talked about that a bit. The dedication of the Mishkan, and I picked, which includes also the donations to the Mishkan and the creation of the menorah, which was, what was the original menorah made out of? Nobody? Gold. Gold. Where did they get gold from? Je ne sais pas. It's another miracle. I don't know. They made they stripped the Egyptians. So we talked about the Haftarah of Zechariah. You know what Hallel is? So we say Hallel, which is kind of interesting for Hanukkah. So for a non-biblical holiday, even a non-Mishnaic holiday, it really is built up. It's quite interesting that we say Hallel. Psalms of praise, Psalms 113 to 118, special honor for this non-biblical Chag. It shows this kind of back and forth about Hanukkah through the ages. Sometimes the rabbis, wanted to make it small, and sometimes bring it up, depending on the zeitgeist and the needs of the age. I think so. And we talked about the history of martyrdom, that the Maccabee story is one of both glory and sadness in equal degrees. And the second book of Maccabees is kind of like a balance to the first book. One is very glorious about war, and one is the sadness and despair of martyrdom. And hence the name, the word Maccabee. There's much more to say, but I'll just take closing questions, and we will wrap it up. Rabbi.
This goes back a lot of years. I think I remember from one of my professors in Cincinnati And one of the connection between Hanukkah and Sukkot was that Sukkot was delayed that year because of the guerrilla war. And it was postponed until after the war was over. And so that's why Hanukkah is 8 days.
That's one theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had forgotten that one. Yeah, there is that theory. So yeah, you remember right, but nobody really knows. Passover is also 8 days, but the theory is that they were, when the Maccabees decided that they would rededicate the temple, and how long should they celebrate this great victory, unexpected victory? They picked 8 days. Why? Because of Sukkot, Sukkot. That's, of course, unless you believe the story of the cruise of oil is what actually happened. Then that's why there's 8 days.
Because if it's 8 days, then the Shabbos is right in the middle, with 4 on each side.
That's perfect.
You can't do that with 7.
No, can't do that with 7.
Okay, I think we can sum it all up here. This is our last lecture, last event that we do with Rabbi Barrof. Thank you so much. I have to say that being here today is like feeling like being in Beit HaMidrash. It was very vivid, alive, and everyone have a lot to say and a lot to ask. Thank you so much for allowing me.
Thank you. It's like olden times, so thank you for inviting me back. It's great to see everybody, and hope we'll see each other again. We'll see you again. Thank you. Yeah, that was interesting. Thank you. Yeah, very nice. And we got everybody. They have a plan. I was wondering, be there.